It's How I Make Money with Andy Beadle. I am your host, Andy Beadle, and joining us today is Alex Reid. He is based in the UK, up near Manchester in England. And Alex is a consultant in the marketing space, and his website is ownyourquiet.com, OWNYOUR quiet.com. I got to say, Alex, first off, thank you for coming. This is terrific. I'm really excited. We have had a bunch of international guests. And I love it. I mean, it's just the thing about the platform of being able to podcast is getting to have conversations with people who otherwise I would never have the opportunity to meet. It's very exciting. So thanks for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, really happy to join you today, Andy.
Well, great. Let's just get right into it. I have got to say, no one has ever in my entire 53 years, I think, even thought of describing me as an introvert. And I went to your site just to prep for today's episode, and a lot of people are like, the idea of being mindful is very, very big in the marketing space and in the workplace these days. But I just got absolutely captivated by the headline on the site. There's an introvert-friendly way to grow your business, and I was just I'm going to shut up. It's brilliant. Tell me what you do, where you came up with it, how you serve clients. I think it's absolute genius because it speaks to this problem that so many business owners have where, they're not how shall I say it? They're not recharged by crazy social schedules and all this stuff. And instead, they want an approach that doesn't require them to do that. So I am going to be quiet. I think it's brilliant. Tell us how you got to where you're doing what you do and how you help people.
Yeah, no, really great to kind of explain it because on many ideas, it starts from the inside, from a personal insight, personal recognition, Andy. And I think for me, because I'm a bit more introverted now, I might talk about this later on, but introverts come in all shapes and sizes. And I'm not, I'm more of a social introvert, so
Yep.
quite happy to talk. But at the same time, what I recognized over time during my life is that there were environments I was working in that weren't working fantastically well for me. And they weren't working fantastically well because I kind of found them quite de-energizing.
Mm-hmm.
And I, just by virtue of the work I was doing, I was forcing myself to fit in and push on in order to get ahead in my career. But
Yep.
ultimately caught up with me in the sense that I started to get a bit overwhelmed and a bit burnt out. And as I started to educate myself about what's going on inside my head here, why am I feeling the way I'm feeling, that's when I started to understand more about what introversion is.
Right.
And through that, I discovered that it's nothing to do with a lot of the popular myths that are out there about being shy or quiet or reclusive.
Yeah.
Nothing like that, but
True.
that still kicks around out there, Andy, sadly. It's much more just about the fact that our brains are wired and behave in a slightly different way. And what that really means is that we've got a lower level of tolerance for a lot of that social stimulation. So we're in open plan offices, if we're in large social gatherings, parties and whatnot, we can tolerate it, but only for so long. And then we need to go away and essentially lie down in a dark room for a little bit just to recharge. So that was really how I started to learn about myself. And then as I started to look further afield, I identified, well, it's not just me feeling this way. There's a whole bunch of other folk feeling this way as well. And it's kind of holding them back because irrespective of whether they're in paid employment, working for someone else, or like I do, working for yourself, the fact that you have this lower level of tolerance for this social stimulation means that it makes it harder to show up. And particularly nowadays online, because we're doing, just like you and I right now, we're doing so much business online, on social media, on podcasts and so forth. It's more challenging to show up and be that person, be that front of your company, if after an hour you have to then disappear and lie down for 3 hours to recover. So that basically is how I came to where I am now, finding a challenge that I knew that not just myself, but others had, and then building a business around about it, which is essentially helping these people to realize that there's more than one way to grow a business. You don't need to mimic the kind of more extroverted, if you will. You can
Right.
still build your
Yeah.
business, build your visibility, and as I say it, introvert friendly ways.
And I think it's interesting to note. I think that point about, especially when the pandemic hit, I had clients who I had never physically met, who I'd never seen for years, and then suddenly we're all on video calls. And I had no idea. I mean, it is at least to me, and I'm happy to talk to anybody anytime. Never met anybody I didn't know. And but even to me, to be in the video environment and having important meetings where you're working through stuff, it requires almost as much mental energy and concentration as being in a country where you don't speak the language that well. And it's just, you're there. Excuse me. And in our business as well, we've got a lot of different team members and a lot of different styles. And I've started, you kind of work with people over time and you go, oh, wait a minute. I as an extrovert, I think with my mouth. Right. And then I've got team members who actually think with their brains, which I think is what the brain was intended to do. I don't know what I actually do with my brain, but it's really interesting. And for the extroverts of the world, we're so used to everything happening instantaneously. And, I ask a question, I want an answer right now. And I think that extroversion being the default costs a lot of businesnes, because it makes you a terrible listener in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Andy, because there's lots and lots of environments where the extroverts dominate the conversation. And, it's not because they are being deliberately malicious. It's just because that's how you operate. That's how you get energized. But what happens is that when all the talking's happening, and there's less listening happening, which is, I think, is kind of what you've said.
Yeah.
So there needs to be a better balance in recognizing that there are people in your team that are naturally stronger listeners. They're the ones that are just sitting in a meeting and just listening, observing, looking around, taking things in. And probably what might happen towards the end of a meeting, then they might say something. Then they might come out with an insight, and boom, when they come out with an insight, it's a really, really good insight that nobody else has thought of. But it's the very fact that just by nature, they're not the person during the meeting who's saying a lot of stuff. They're just kind of taking things in, assessing, which is a good strength to have, isn't it? Because it's not all
absolutely.
just talking.
Yeah. And when you're building a business, I think there's a lot of I don't think, we all know this. Everybody's got their sort of, here's what you need to do every day. Whatever, send 92 emails, post on Instagram 5 times, whatever. But something that I think gets lost in that is, and as a marketing firm, we tell clients this all the time. It's not about you. It's about the customer. It's about the client. And unless you learn to listen so that you can actually address the need, you're inhibiting your growth as a business. And that's a strength that I think the traditional, quote, introverts bring to the table. Introverts hear a lot more than I do. What you take 2 people to an event, one, and my wife's extroversion is so off the charts, it makes me look like an introvert. And, we'll talk about being at an event and come back, years ago when we used to go to events, we'll talk about coming back from an event and she'll just ask me straight up, okay, what do you think happened? Because she knows that I'm sitting back just a little more than she is and looking. And then, you've got other people. So I think it's absolutely genius. When you interact with people and your clients, what kind of problems are they bringing to you? And then second, what are the kind of early stages that you help in helping them kind of put a growth plan for their business in place?
Well, largely it can start with mindset, because as much as you can talk about a marketing strategy, which is ultimately where we get to, most often it's about their mental headspace and the fact that they know or have a rough idea of where they want to go in terms of building their business. But where things start to fall down a little is the fact that when they look at how they're going to do that, and how being online in many ways, that they then start to run into things like imposter syndrome.
Oh,
They
interesting.
run
Okay.
into things like, procrastination, because they're a little bit reluctant to show up and
Right.
be visible. So yeah, the starting point isn't just sitting down and whipping out a kind of marketing strategy and talking through that. It's more about just let's talk a little bit about where you are today in terms of how you feel about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Because only once you've had that discussion and got to a slightly deeper level about what are the things that are getting in their way, you then move forward and say, okay, when we talk about building an introvert-friendly marketing strategy, let's just look at the ways we can start to do that, in terms of how you present yourself online.
Sure. So what are the initial? I like that, imposter syndrome, procrastination, huge one for people who have some kind of anxiety about a project, or being on a channel. What are the mindset? And I don't want to say tricks, but what are the mindset techniques that you work with people on helping them navigate that new and really uncomfortable space? Like, what are you doing to help get them comfortable or more comfortable than they were before?
Yeah, well, it can help to look at how, when we're talking about particular challenge that they're looking at or facing, to kind of
Mm.
look at reframing it. Because the way I tend to approach things is, look, uh, in life, we've all faced up and resolved challenges inside and outside the workplace. And we've found strategies for doing that. So sometimes what it's doing is taking the person outside of the specific challenge they're talking to me about
Mm-hmm.
and asking them to look at another challenge they've had in their life and how they went about resolving that. And what that helps is them, the client, to identify the strategies they've already got and then connect those strategies to the thing that we're talking about. Because what you're then doing is, rather than just telling the client, do this or do that,
Right.
you're helping them to discover within themselves that they've already got those strategies.
Mm-hmm.
And so therefore that becomes very empowering for them, because it's suddenly a bit of an aha moment that
Right.
says, okay, yeah, actually, I've got it. I just didn't realize I had these strategies and I could use these strategies in this way to help me solve this challenge.
And people are startlingly unaware of how successful they have already been.
Mm,
I mean, anybody you talk to, it is absolutely true. You have already survived 100% of the bad days in your life to date.
hmm
And you've developed, you've developed strategies, capabilities, and skills that have allowed you to do that. And I think no matter who you are, and this to me is the real power of a kind of a focus on mindfulness and being very present, because it's a level of objectivity about yourself that I think is very empowering, right? And to an extent, if you're a profoundly introverted business owner, just reaching out to you and saying, "Hey, I'm raising my hand. Here I am. I need some help." Like, that's a skill. That's a strategy that they've already developed, right? I think that's really great. So what, you worked in the corporate world for a while, and before you started doing your own thing. And at least in my experience, even in the IT world, the path to success is often dominated by people who have a much more extroverted personality, because they get seen and they get heard. But what do you recommend for people who are in the workplace? I mean, did they treat this the same way a business owner would, right? How do they show up in a way to kind of at least make them and give them more comfort in that environment that just rewards extroversion so heavily?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. It's very, very relevant. I think because of what's happened in the last 12 months, because if
Mm.
you go pre-COVID, a lot of these work environments and IT technologies, a really great example because they move at such a fast pace. So typically what I would see when I was working in those environments would be a whole bunch of people who, yeah, in one end of the spectrum, were really extroverted, really dominating the conversation, were more likely to get ahead, not necessarily because of greater capability,
Mm-hmm.
but just because of their more natural ability to build conversations, to persuade, to influence, to
Yep.
be visible. And then you had a whole bunch of other people, myself included, who weren't really that comfortable doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And those people can be in different areas of a business. I was in like a more marketing area, and the marketing,
Right.
as you know, Andy, it's quite a social and outgoing type of environment to work in.
I had not
And
noticed
then
that.
you've got no, I guess I didn't think you would have done. No, how could that possibly be true? And then, of course, you've got the other departments, areas such as your software engineers, your programmers, and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I'm not going to generalize because you'll have introverts and extroverts in those areas.
Sure.
But you tend to find, I've found in my experience, it tends to attract a more introverted type of person because they tend to get energized by creating things, creating new software, for example.
Yep.
And just through observation, what you probably find is those are the people who are sitting there at their desk with their headphones on, and the headphones are on as much as anything else to drown out all of
Right.
that chatter and noise around the office.
Right. Yep.
So to answer your question, in terms of what the strategies for them, I think it's a two-way street between that kind of more introverted person recognizing that they have to, as a minimum, be able to open up a little and share what their needs are
Mm-hmm.
with those around them, and particularly if they've got a manager, share those needs with the manager, but then also for the manager to also have a greater understanding of the needs of that team member as well. Because I
Right.
think through that shared understanding, you're more likely to get a happier working relationship, because it might mean, I think we're here already actually through COVID, that if that more introverted person said, look, I don't really work well in this office environment 5 days a week. I really need 2 days at home
Oh,
in
yeah.
my own
Yeah.
quiet space, yeah. And I
Mm-hmm.
can be really productive my 2 days at home because I've got no distractions. It's my nice quiet space and just go on and do stuff. But yeah, I can come into the office 3 days a week. That's okay. But I think with COVID and with, as we're doing now, working from home, I
Yep.
think that request is kind of been answered, because now moving forward, many companies are saying to their employees, hey, if you want to
Right.
work from home all the time, that's cool. If you want to work from home 2 days a week, that's cool. So I think for introverts, it's probably a better thing because they can now find a space, quieter space, where they can be more productive and more happy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and I think there's a lot of very, very rich, a lot of very, very rich resources that are available to leaders, and they don't tap into them because they're always in this mindset where, a lot of people believe going to a meeting and having a lot to say amounts to productivity. And that counts for managers as well as team members, as who are in those meetings. And I think that you miss a lot, whether it's with a developer or with your sales. I talk to salespeople. You get salespeople all the time. You listen to them on the phone. Like, salespeople cannot abide, by and large, even 5 seconds of silence. And you want to say to them, slow down. Let them think. Let them answer. Let them talk. It's okay. Nothing's going to happen. You're going to be okay. And for leaders to really understand the value of saying, oh, do I have team members whose skills and capabilities I'm not getting access to because I'm not providing an environment for them where they feel comfortable giving the kind of team-based feedback that is so important. That's not on the team member. They've got the skills. That's on the employer to create a balanced environment where everybody's style. You got people who are visual learners or auditory learners.
Yeah.
And all of that. I tend to be a very reading. I read and I learn. And I've got plenty of friends who they've got to see it to learn it, or hear it and see it. And I think understanding that these team members who you go, gosh, I wish you'd speak up more in meetings. It's like, well, why don't we make the meetings a place where I'd want to speak up? That's I think that might be a way to look at it. And you're absolutely right. I think COVID has changed the game for a lot of people in terms of working from home. And I think giving people the choice is going to be hugely powerful for businesses of all sizes.
And I think what's interesting now, good to get your views on this, Andy. Is if go to the point about salespeople, as you say,
Mm.
salespeople can't stop themselves sometimes, and I think part of that is because of the training they've had. They've been trained to behave in a
Yeah.
certain way
Yep.
because they've got a sales system in their head that they have to follow in order to get from A to B to C to close a sale. And it actually means that they're doing themselves a disservice because they're not actually getting out of that system and just listening
Yeah.
to what someone is saying and what they're looking for.
Yep.
And now that we're in this virtual world, I think the whole process of dynamic of sales is changing because with the less opportunity to do face-to-face sales, you have to do sales in a different way, online through these type of platforms that we're on at the moment. And that changes things quite a lot as well, because the dynamic when you're just talking to someone online is quite different when you're trying to talk and sell something to someone in a face-to-face environment.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's 100% true. And there's a lot of research done now, and there's a guy, I'm probably familiar with his work. He's at Georgetown. His name is Cal Newport, and he's a computer science, and he's the whole anti-email guy. Excuse me. And very much on what he calls deep work. But I know so many people. So I have a PhD. And that was back when there were libraries with books in them. And if you didn't have the book in your library, you had to get it from another library. All of the old school paper, hours and hours poring over things. And his thesis, I think, is really interesting. And that is, in the world where we reward high noise and a lot of activity and a lot of instantaneous response, we're losing a huge ability of the human brain to do concentrated work over long periods of time. And there are just a lot of things that cannot be accomplished without that kind of work. And in my experience, introverts come to the table with a better capacity for that work than to be honest with you, people like me,
You've kind of done my sales pitch for me in that regard, because that's my argument as well, Andy. That the introverts are very well placed based in the world we're in today. We've got some really big challenges that need to be solved in the world, and they're not going to be solved they're not just going to be solved by talking about things. It requires focus, attention on something it's quite hard to solve. And all these distractions we have in terms of email, as you've touched on, or social media notifications popping up, it's hard to be focused and productive when you're constantly distracted. So I think, introverts who are happier to turn all that stuff off, turn email off, turn all the notifications off, and just sit there for 90 minutes, 2 hours.
Right.
Yeah, that's a great skill to have, because it's a real challenge to have that skill right now.
Yeah, and I think team members whose ability to do that is well refined, or business owners for that matter, it's such a huge asset. And to create an environment where you basically devalue that and say, oh no, you got to be instantaneous, you got to respond. You're losing so much capability to get work done, and you're really losing a lot of productivity, in my opinion. So I think it's absolutely we're kind of ready, thanks to COVID, to start thinking, well, wait a minute, is the way that we're doing things in the traditional office environment really the best way to get done what we need done? I don't think anybody on their deathbed is going to say, man, I wish I'd gone to another meeting. But there are going to be people on their deathbed who say, man, I wish I'd had the time to finish whatever, the novel I was writing, the record I was going to do, the song I was going to play, all of that. And introverts, I think, come to the table prepackaged with a lot of ability in that gets overlooked.
Yeah, I think that's true. It's just a case now, I think, of a wider acceptance and understanding of that, of those introvert strengths, so that they can be promoted and they can be supported. And it's just a process that perhaps COVID is helping to accelerate that. And the discussion that we're having happens to accelerate that, because we're talking to an audience who can understand it and then hopefully use it and apply it.
Yeah. Well, I've gotten us off into deep psychology here.
Yeah, well, hey,
I know
my
that.
favorite subject. Yeah.
There you go. I know that you've got a kind of an assessment that people can do on the website that's really aimed at mindfulness ideas and techniques. Take us a little bit through why you have that kind of be the first contact that people have with your model and how you serve them, and what somebody can expect by going and doing that.
Yeah, I very deliberately, because in terms of how I like to build up a conversation with someone, I like to have a grounding for it. And I think that little assessment that you're referring to, Andy, becomes a grounding, because what the assessment is essentially doing, and it's really delivered in the form of a quiz, is
Mm-hmm.
to the help the user and also myself understand uh, more about their personality,
Okay.
more about the kind of archetype. In this lovely world of marketing that we work in, archetypes are often used, aren't they, from a
Oh yeah.
branding standpoint?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that helping someone to get an understanding of which archetype best represents them then becomes a conversation starter.
Right.
Because if they are, I mean, the most obvious archetype that we hear about is the hero or the hero's journey.
Right.
But
Yep.
of course, there are many other archetypes like the explorer or the caregiver or
Mm-hmm.
the regular guy. So there's these different archetypes. So this little quiz outputs who that archetype the archetype best represents the person who's completing the quiz. That becomes the foundation for a conversation about, well, how could we use that when we start to think
Mm-hmm.
about your marketing strategy? How can we start to build that into your marketing strategy, so the things that you're doing online, how you're showing up, how you're presenting yourself, is consistent with that archetype?
Mm-hmm.
Because that then makes it easier for you to to show up online, because you know how you're showing up online,
Yep.
and you know how you want people to respond to you when you're online.
Mm-hmm. And I think that ties back into the different ways that people learn and interact with people. And at one point, I owned a gym, and you would have people come in, and we would talk to them and say, "Okay, well, what are your goals?" And
Mhm.
you'd hear all sorts of stuff. But what was so fascinating to me was people looking desperately for that one thing they should do, or that one system. And you stop them and you say, "Hey, wow, there's a lot that goes into this, and there's your body type, and if you've got any injuries, and what kinds of activity you enjoy, why go do exercise you hate." And a lot of that comes back to that idea of the archetype. It's sort of like, well, who are you? And
Mm.
sure, people change over time, but at least starting from where you are and respecting the value of that, and working with that value and presenting it to the world, I think is a huge step forward, rather than saying, "Oh, do my program and you've got to call 900 people and look them in the eye." As I was saying, when people go out, they try to fit themselves into a mold that doesn't really match who they are, and then they're not effective. People kind of see that as inauthentic, and then nobody's listening to anybody.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I love the fact you use a kind of sporting analogy, because I like to use them a lot as well.
Yeah.
And I think there are parallels between that sports coaching,
Mm.
training, and business and marketing, because just like there's no two exact golfers or no two exact tennis players, and that their bodies are different. They behave different ways, and so they're going to be coached in different ways, aren't they? They're not going to be given
Right.
a cookie cutter
Yep.
coaching plan, are they? They're going to have a custom designed coaching plan based on who they are, their body, and so forth. And I think it's the same when we get into this world of business and marketing. If we're running our own businesses, each business owner is different.
Mm-hmm.
So, if they're looking for support, then the coaching plan, support plan should be customized to who they are.
Right. Absolutely. The so I coached football / soccer for years
Mm,
and years, and you would have these young players, and my approach, theory, I don't know what you would call it, the way I did it was, you'd look at an individual player, no matter how old they were, and you say, "Okay, well, here's the progression of skills that you need to have to master the game, and then here is the different types of player that there are right? There are people who are more comfortable being over the ball, guarding the ball. They're bigger, they're smaller, they're faster, what have you. And you always say about that player, okay, hey, what's the next right thing for them? The next right thing. I don't care about 2 years from now. All I care is about what's the next thing you need to learn to get to your goal. And it made, it made for good teams. We had, but it really made for kids who grew to love the sport. And something that just, this is maybe a little emotionally overblown, but it literally breaks my heart to talk to people who are business owners who feel trapped in their business. It's just to hear that, you go, gosh, you devote so much time and energy to this. Figure out a way to do this that speaks to who you are, which sounds somewhat adjacent to what you're talking about in working with people in a coaching context.
Yeah, I think it is, because ultimately you can get trapped. You're running a business. It's so easy to get trapped working in your business, not on it. It's old, I think it's Michael Gerber, E-Myth, is one of those famous books from years ago I read years and years ago, Andy. Yeah. And that was really all about the fact that for so many business owners, they get trapped working in their business, so working so many long hours and never have the time to step back and work on their business.
Yep.
And yeah, I think that's, this parallel between sports and businesses, it kind of holds up. And I think you're right. It's just helping that person to focus on the next thing, because I think where this whole idea of overwhelm or paralysis comes in is when it's kind of like the rabbit being, stuck in the headlights. You just freeze up, because there's so many things you have to try and decide and make decisions on.
Right.
But having someone to support you and say, look, okay, let's just break this all down and just look at that next thing, what the next hour looks like, what the next day looks like. That's all we're going to do right now. Once we've sorted that, then we'll look at the next thing, and then we'll move forward from there.
Yep. I had a colleague who ran these 100-mile races, 50 and 100-mile races, and he was in his 60s, And I said to him, I was in my late 20s, I said, man, how do you do it? He says, I know this is going to sound really glib and trite, but it really is. You just put one foot in front of the other. He's like, that's it. That's really all there is. I don't have any other technique other than if things are bad, I just tell myself, all right, just take the next step. And then the next one, and then the next one. And so many times, just the gift of knowing what the next step is really important to help somebody unlock being stuck.
It's quite liberating, because I do a bit of running myself, not 100-mile runs. I'm not that mad. But the strategy that I use, I think a lot of runners use, is it's just focusing on, if it's not next foot, it's looking at the next physical marker ahead of you. Maybe it's a lamppost or a street sign. Once I get to there, then we'll look at the next one. And that's how you keep yourself going, because of course you're getting tired.
Right.
But you want to keep going, and you just keep focusing that next little thing right in front of you. And business is no different, really, in so much that you just apply the same strategy, but in a slightly different environment.
Yeah. And you have business owners, and you talk to them, and essentially you say, where do you want to go? And they say, well, I want to go 6 miles down that road. And then they come back to you and they're like, but what about that house over there? And then this dog behind me, and I saw this mailbox that was really cool. And the answer is, no. Just go to the next light post down the road. Let's just do that, right? Ignore everything else. And ignoring everything else is hard. But again, I think that is in some ways an innate gift that introverts have, is the ability to focus. And a lot of what you do to liberate that energy is just give them permission to do it.
Yep, that's a key word, permission. It's liberating when they find they've got permission, and that really does change that mindset, so that they can say, hey, I can do this. It's something actually I'm pretty good at, because, as I've said, I'm applying that strategy in different types of environments. It may not be work related. So you just bring it into that work setting and say, look, whatever it is you're struggling with in your business at the moment, let's just focus on that next thing.
Absolutely.
If you can learn how to do that repeatedly, suddenly you start to move forward a lot quicker than you would have done otherwise.
Yeah, that is so true. Well, I know in the States things are kind of slowly opening back up as vaccine use takes hold. At least here the news reports are that the UK is doing a fairly good job of that as well. What's got you excited about your business and your kind of new projects in 2021?
I think what's most exciting me is the feedback I'm getting, through either clients or through the wider network that I'm plugged into, Andy. I think there's a lot of excitement, and we've kind of covered it a little bit, that there's a lot of people who are now recognizing that the sort of natural personality, i.e. being kind of introvert, is actually more of an opportunity today moving forward than it probably ever has been.
Right.
Just because work environments are changing, because there's a need for the type of natural mindset that an introvert brings to the table or to their business. So the more that I'm engaged in this, the more excited I am about what those opportunities are. And, really for me, the opportunity to help others, help those who are kind of struggling a little bit and just need that helping hand. I think that's a really big thing, because you think it really gets me out of bed in the morning. It's not just helping those individuals. It's looking at a big picture and saying, look, the world we're in today, we've got some pretty big challenges, not just COVID. We've got the climate change. We've got loads of challenges, and it needs everyone to be able to step up and work in the way that they're best suited to and be around the people that can support them. So I think for me, that's a really exciting, it's a really exciting kind of place to be at the moment.
Yeah, no, I get that. It's very true. I feel I'm an optimist by nature, and the last year has been tough. I mean, there's no getting around that. But I just have this deep belief, and I don't know if it's just to keep from crying, but that we are going to see an unleashing of creativity in the next 5 to 10 years that has been unprecedented, and we're already seeing the signs of that. The vaccine research curve was so compressed, and the technology behind it had been around for a while. But I've got a friend who lives in Houston, and he's part of the medical campus down there, and we were talking. He says, yeah, what's happened in the last 9 months is going to have breakthrough implications for how we treat cancer or any number of other, so I feel like all of these people who were overlooked, and whose approaches, no, are suddenly going to become the folks who get the resources and get the support, and we're just going to move forward. It's just really, I think we're going to have an exciting time to be alive in the next few years. It's really great.
Yeah, it's been tough. It's been tough for sure, Andy. But I think, yes, I'm going to see this unleashing of creativity, of talent that might have been suppressed. And I think even more so because I think people are recognizing that as much as we've got all this technology at our disposal, ultimately success comes when you've got people really getting together and collaborating, working very well in order to solve these big problems. Because we all want that human connection, don't we? It's not just about technology solving all the problems. It's about human beings at the end of the day coming together to solve these problems. So I think, I'm pretty optimistic about things as well for the next few years.
It's hard to be in business for yourself and not be optimistic. So
you got to have that. Yeah, absolutely. You got to have the glass half full. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, Alex, all of this is just build up to the two most important questions ever that we ask every podcast guest. I know. No pressure. Take as long as you like to answer. So number one of those questions is, if you could give one piece of advice to someone who is maybe going to leave the corporate world, leave the IT world that you were a part of, and start their own business, no matter what vertical that business is in, if you could give them one piece of advice, what would that piece of advice be?
Trust your intuition, because I've come in the journey, Andy, where I hedged, I was in the fence, came out of corporate world, tried to do my own thing, went back into it. I would say just trust what your gut is telling you and move forward and get the right support around you so that any sort of temptation to move backwards is kind of overcome. Because I think that can be the natural tendency for a lot of kind of more introverts, is to go back to that kind of place, safe space. But getting out of corporate world, starting your own business, there's no way of avoiding it is risky. But introverts can happily do it.
Right.
It's just about trust Trust the fact that you've got everything you need, and be a little bit bold, move forward. And right now, as you just touched on, it's a great time to go out and do your own thing.
Yeah. Well, and let me back up a little bit, because I think what you said was really important. Trusting your intuition is scary, especially when you're in a high risk environment. Which when you have a lot of risk when you start a business. That's just how it goes. Emotional risks, psychological risk, monetary risk, all that. And you said something I think that would be easy to just skate over, but I want to talk about a little more. Get the support you need around you, and that's a absolutely crucial, I think, follow-up to the idea of trusting your intuition. So when you say that, what kinds of support do you think people would do well to have in place as they embark on the journey of starting their own business?
Well, I think it definitely helps to have a professional coach. I think there's a coach for everyone. I think there's a coach for everyone, whether you recognize it or not. And having a professional coach, someone, if you're starting your business and you haven't got, and nobody will have all the skills to start the business and do everything themselves.
Right.
So having a coach who's kind of walked in your shoes, who's a few steps ahead of you in terms of running their own business, and can support you and can understand you. So if you're an introvert, probably helps to work with another introvert.
Right.
So having that type of support is really, really important, because unlike extroverts who probably gravitate to being more out there, being more sociable, and going asking for that support, introverts just by nature might say, look, I'm just going to be in my own space and try to chip away at this and do it myself without getting support. And trust me, I've been there. It's not a winning strategy, because you end up wasting a lot of time, wasting a lot of money, and really getting demoralized about the whole thing.
Yep.
So the sooner, if you're stepping out of the corporate world, the sooner you can get that type of professional support just to really help you move forward quickly, then the happier you're going to be in the long run.
Mm-hmm. And I will say, I think you've got a lot of people out there who are coaches for this or that, and the coaching space is crowded, and I think it gets people a little bit jaded. But this is my fourth business. I've been in business for over 20 years. And I have got to say, I've got a friend in Houston in the real estate business and real estate space. And he and I were talking the other week, a couple of weeks ago, and he said, yeah, I've spent over $250,000 in coaching and personal development in the last 10 years. And he said, I don't ever see that changing at that, like $25,000, $30,000 a year. Yeah, no problem. And you kind of hear that number and you go, wow, that's a lot of money. On the other hand, you have a guy who's extremely successful, and he's absolutely devoted to the idea that there are people who have been down the path I want to go. They can give me the support that I need on a lot of different levels, and I am willing to invest in that because it is an investment. So I couldn't agree with you more. I think coaching is absolutely crucial. It really it's transformative, right? The ability to step outside and have somebody say, hey, think about this, do that. I don't think you can match it.
Yeah, and I guess, again, going back to the sporting parallel, Andy, if you're a professional golfer or tennis player, whatever, and your ambition is to become world number one, you've got a decision to make. You could try to just coach yourself,
right?
Coach your way to number one, and good luck with that. Or you hire in a professional coach, and they say, okay, in the next 12 months, here's what we're going to do, and the target is to get to number one in the world in 12 months, or whatever the ranking is.
Right.
And again, it's the same. It's a mindset thing. So if you're in business, you can either try to do it all yourself and hope that you're going to get to where you want to get to, or you can, it's going to cost a bit of money, but that money is going to pay dividends, because in 12 months or 24 months, I'm going to have paid it back several times over, based on the amount of revenue, amount of clients I've been able to attract through the coaching that I've received.
Yep. And you also, I think, in talking to people, the fear is, I'll gladly I'll gladly buy a truck and finance a truck for my landscaping business. That's an investment. Coaching, I don't know, it seems like a waste of money. And the answer is it's more of an investment than buying that truck. in a lot of ways, because the dividends that you'll get, you buy a truck or something like that, that's a depreciating asset. The instant you own it, it's worth less. Coaching and that kind of ongoing stuff, the instant you get it, it's worth more than you paid for it. And those opportunities are not easy to come by in the world.
No, they're absolutely not. And I think that is a great analogy, because we are so prone to spend money on material stuff like trucks or whatever it happens to be quite happily.
Yeah.
Whereas the investment in ourselves often takes second priority.
Mm-hmm.
But the irony is, and I suppose now more than ever, if we want to grow our own business, investment in ourselves is absolutely critical, and we can't assume that other people are going to spend money on us on our behalf. I.e., especially if you come out of corporate world, you can't rely on a business training you anymore, spending lots of money on you. You have to take responsibility for your own progression in life, and that means spending money on yourself, which means by extension, a coach or training programs, whatever it happens to be. It's finding the thing that's going to help you the most and help you move forward the fastest.
Yep.
And ultimately, you're not going to regret it if a few years down the line you've achieved whatever your dreams are. Material possessions, big house, living in a new part of the world, whatever it happens to be. It's all actually paid off because you actually took the bold decision at the beginning to spend a bit of money and get the right person around you.
I think, too, people don't understand. I know this is going to sound bizarre. People intellectually understand the value of education, but they don't understand the emotional and psychological value of education and the need to invest in it. Most of us, we get forced, we go to school, we go for however many years, and we go on to university. And I was a university professor for 10 years, and I can assure you that most of what gets taught at the university is absolutely useless for any applications that anyone would care about. Kind of interesting if you like 18th century literature or what have you. And then later in life, the idea of investing in themselves might take the form of, I got a gym membership, and I go to the gym, and maybe I work with a personal trainer, and then I had a nutritionist make a menu for me. And you kind of say, gosh, you're really nibbling around the edges, and getting a person, like you've said, who's further along in the journey that you want to take to advise you, who's a good fit, and all of that. I think it just makes all the difference. So
it makes sense. And I think in the context of business and running a business, things like marketing isn't something that you do off and on. It's a practice. I kind of use the analogy. It's like brushing your teeth.
Right.
You brush your teeth twice a day because it's the right thing to do. Marketing, if you're running your own business, Andy, this. It's you have to do it every single day. It's a practice, just like practicing any other piano, golf, tennis, and therefore you got to think about it. That's the mindset you have to adopt, and then through that you have to think about: am I going to do all that practice myself, or do I get a coach or someone in to help me with that practice so that I can do it most effectively, and hopefully do it in ways that are more enjoyable as well? Because if you're not enjoying doing the marketing stuff, then it's going to be a real struggle to build your business, because it's just a fundamental, isn't it, of building any business is marketing.
Yeah, and I don't dislike brushing my teeth, but I don't think to myself, oh gosh, I get to go brush my teeth, this is going to be great. You just do it, right? And if somebody said to you, oh man, I haven't brushed my teeth for about half a year because I've been really busy doing other, you kind of look at them and go, what's the matter with you? So I love that analogy. That's very apt. And that is, and businesses that do not see marketing that way struggle, just like people who don't brush their teeth. They get a lot of cavities in the business, and then they need emergency measures to solve it. So I think that's
exactly,
a very apt analogy. All right. Well, I think you're absolutely correct. Follow your intuition and get the support you need. I love that idea of putting that support in place at the beginning. Don't wait. Don't go 2 years down the road and then decide. Do it now and get in the habit. Very important. And that's going to lead us to our last and final question, the most important question you'll be asked, at least in the next hour, maybe today. If you could have a meal with any living public figure, who would it be, why, and what meal would you share with them?
Hmm. And being the good introvert that I am, Andy, I've prepped for this one. I've given it some thought,
Great.
given it a lot of depth of thought. And actually, so the answer is that it's a living person. So right now, I think it's timely because right now, I'd love to sit down and have a meal with Elon Musk.
Yeah.
And I think Elon's a little bit more introverted, I believe. So it might be two introverts getting together. And I would love to pick his brain about, well, it's an incredibly big brain, isn't it? But I'd love
Oh
to pick
gosh.
his brain about the many different things that he's involved in at the moment, just because that'd be so insightful just to get a little snippet of how the heck his brain actually works and how he can juggle so many things in his head at one time.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a source of fascination.
Yeah.
What would we eat? Be something fairly casual. I think we just get some nachos or something. Just I don't know what he eats. I have no idea what his favorite food is. And I'll eat pretty much anything that's put in front of me. So just some nachos, a beer, and an hour of his time, just to yeah, just get a little insight into the guy because he's doing
Strangely,
some
I
really
believe.
interesting stuff. Yeah.
Strangely, I believe that that nachos and beer, Elon Musk would be really excited about that. Oh, this is great! I think that's absolutely true. You know, he's a very polarizing figure to a lot of people, and from my standpoint, the word visionary, I think, gets thrown around a lot and is not necessarily accurate. There are certainly people who have seen an opportunity in the marketplace and capitalized on it or done something fundamentally different. I think Jeff Bezos, Amazon, absolutely. But I look at Elon Musk as truly being a visionary. And, you know, here's a guy who said, yeah, I'll go ahead and do PayPal and we'll make a lot of money so I can do the stuff I really want to do, which is basically, from what I can tell, save the planet. I mean, I think that's sort of his agenda, right? You know, it's humanity needs to be in space, and you go say that to somebody at a cocktail party, and they go, "How much have you had to drink?" And I love the fact that he is, at least to the public persona of Elon Musk, you know, he is absolutely unashamed to be exactly who he is. And it's something I have tremendous respect for him in that regard. And I also, you know, to me, you know, the line between visionary thinking and just pure audacity is very thin. And he is able to just bring these ideas to the table that just seem insane. And, oh, okay, great. 6 months later, we've got a working spaceship. We got a working flamethrower of all things. We have this giant machine that bores tunnels. We've got electric cars everywhere. Absolutely, you know, like, yeah, absolutely. Being in the presence of that mind for an hour would be a very, very profound experience, I think.
Yeah, I think so. There's so many ideas going on in his head, and his ability to juggle them, and his tolerance for this
Yeah.
massive risk as
Yeah.
well.
Oh,
Because you know, he's now in this area, as you say, he's putting people into space, which is what normally NASA used to do all of it. Now his business is basically bearing the responsibility for putting people on top of a rocket,
yeah.
you know, and sending them into space. Which, quite frankly, I'm not quite sure I'd sleep at night knowing that my business rests upon this rocket
I
successfully
know.
launching with these people on top of it. It's crazy.
Yeah. I'm not sure he does sleep. I think he may have last slept when he was 13 or 14 and haven't slept since then, you know? So crazy
He has
stuff.
said that. I think he does get by with a very small number of hours of sleep each night. Yeah.
Yeah, that is not me. I'll tell you that for sure. Well, I
Mm-mm.
love it. I think that's a great answer, and you know, he is one of those people that just, I mean, is just a phenomenon in human existence in a lot of ways. You know, and we will look back on, you know, in 100 years, 200 years on the stuff that happened on his watch and just be, wow, amazed. Yeah, I think it would be an amazing meal, and beer and nachos sounds really good, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I'll take
So
it. Yeah.
I'm all about it. Well, hey, I have taken up enough of your time. Again, ladies and gentlemen, our guest is Alex Reid. And his website is ownyourquiet.com. Again, I can't recommend enough And I was going to say, I can't recommend enough if you're a business owner who's more of an introvert to go do the self-assessment, maybe schedule a strategy call and see about working with you. But I think I'm going to just say, I think if you're a business owner and you're looking for guidance, go ahead and do it, because I don't really know anybody else in that coaching marketing space that concentrates on that archetypal introversion and making that a working strategy for people. You're the only person I know, and I know the space pretty well. You're the only person I know doing that. So if you're listening and you're interested in getting a little help to move down the road, I highly recommend you visit Alex's site. You've got the self-assessment there. There's the ability to schedule a strategy call. And I assume you've got clients all over the world, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, but there's no barrier as far as geography is concerned now. So it's mainly English speaking, but different parts of the world. Because ultimately, introverts are everywhere. They're not just in the UK. They're not just in the UK. They're not just hiding out in the UK and the US.
The club. Why did you immigrate to Britain? Well, I'm an introvert and they didn't want me in Germany. That's funny. I love it. So yeah, absolutely. Well, hey, Alex, thank you so much for your time. This has been a wonderful discussion, and I really have so much respect for the way that you approach this, and it's really been an opportunity to think deeply about not only leadership styles as if you're at the helm of a business, but how do you interact with team members and make sure that everybody, and really it's greed. How do I get the most out of people? Right?
Yeah.
As this is not some, just everybody loves each other, but it's like you got people who aren't speaking up, who aren't comfortable, and you're missing out on their contribution, and it's costing you a lot of money. So
and that's the bottom line. This isn't just some sort of wishy-washy discussion. This is ultimately about dollars and cents, pounds and pennies. That is costing businesses because they're not understanding how introverts kind of work most effectively. So the more they can do that, then the more profitable businesses can be. Simple.
Absolutely. Brilliant walk-off. Ladies and gentlemen, this is How I Met Money. I'm your host, Andy Beadle. Our guest today was Alex Reid. His website is ownyourquiet.com. I absolutely recommend that you go check it out. It's a well-built site. In addition to having a great message, do the self-assessment, schedule a strategy call with Alex, and get your mind right. That's all I've got to say. So thanks very much, and we will come to you next week with our next episode. Take care. Thanks for joining us. You can find contact information about our guest in the show notes for this episode. This has been the How I Make Money podcast by Brand Distillers. To learn more, visit branddistillers.com.